I'm Andrew Sherman. I'm a Texas transplant who has always been in pursuit of art as a career. I've played in bands, pursued an acting career in Hollywood, but I found it behind the lens of a camera here in Dallas, Texas. I was born in New York, I've lived in Chicago, Los Angeles, Austin, but I love Dallas. There's a magical artistic scene in Dallas that mostly goes unnoticed to the outside world. This podcast is focused on what makes it so special and the people who make it thrive artistically. If you don't live here, and even if you do, you might not have heard of them. This is the Dallas Famous Podcast.
There's a place that I like to go where the sun sets fast and the night moves slow. A frame of mind and a frequency where the rhythm of life flows naturally.
This week on the Dallas Famous Podcast, we're joined by the incredibly talented Chelsey Danielle, percussionist, singer, keyboardist, looper, conductor, and teacher. She's a true force in the Dallas music scene. Chelsey's artistry spans from her mesmerizing solo performances to her work with Earl, and Helium queens, just to name a few. Trained in classical percussion, her innovative marimba renditions, as well as her solo EP, All of Me, have garnered widespread critical acclaim, solidifying her reputation as a bold and boundary-pushing musician. In this episode, Chelsey shares stories from her journey, her creative process, and her passion for teaching. Don't miss this deep dive with one of Dallas's most versatile musicians. Here it is. Hello, we are back at the Deep Ellum Community Center. I am with Chelsey Danielle. She is a percussionist, musician. Are you a singer?
Yeah, I sing too.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's start with what all do you play?
So just to keep it real basic, I'm just a happy, fun-loving percussionist.
Fun-loving.
And and then I also sing too, but I would say primarily percussion is my first love. Mm-hmm. And including in percussion, because percussion's such like I think a broad term nowadays, and that's what I love about it is that, you can play marimba, you can play drum kit, you can, play congas or,
mm-hmm.
Or anything like that. And so I've made it a goal, my personal goal to play all of it.
Right.
And so, so there's bands that, I'm the drummer in, there's bands in the past that I've been like the keyboard player in playing synth and, and then I'll play like marimba or something like that. And my background's, I started in classical percussion and then just branched out from there. I've done a lot of world percussion. I've done psychedelic bands. I was in a mariachi band. That was my first professional gig. I played percussion in a mariachi band. It was great.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how I
percussion. What were you playing in that band?
I was playing congas, and in the bigger gigs that we had, I brought timbales.
Okay, because you're like walking around.
It was like I was Ricky Ricardo style. Had a conga strapped
You're
around
like Lucy
me.
as Ricky.
Oh my God, it was amazing. It blew my mind. It was one of the best things I think a 23-year-old can experience. Redheaded 23-year-old, just to be like, this is my life right now, and I love this.
Yeah, I did a little marching band. I wasn't in percussion, but I loved it. I wish I was. I think now that school has got a good marching band, but we were not. We were just kind of like, we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, we're like, we're doing it, y'all.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of our, like, we would move without playing was a lot of our thing. And I'm like, isn't that, but no, it's not safe. It's like, okay, we just suck. They don't trust us.
Yeah, I was actually marching band director.
Oh.
That was my first. So I have my degree in classical percussion, but also music education.
Yeah, UNT?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. My first school the first college I went to was TCU.
Oh, okay.
And I was on the drum line there. And like, all of the big classical bands. I did steel band. I did
what's that?
Steel band. So steel drums.
Steel. Okay.
Yeah.
This is your accent coming through.
It's very thick. Yeah.
You're Dallas born and raised, you said?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so Dallas that, my mom's was a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
1975.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when I was an 8-year-old, I was gawking at your mom.
Probably.
I was 8, so I didn't know.
Yeah. She actually was on the Netflix show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I've not checked it out yet.
She was in a couple of episodes, and so it was just fun watching that. Just being like, wow,
growing up with that in the house, huh?
I've been to a lot of Dallas Cowboy cheerleader events. Like that was part of my childhood. Was going to my mom because she's heavily involved in the organization still.
Okay.
Because she was on the legendary 1975 squad that put the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders on the map. and they
we should
talk
have your
about
mom
that.
on.
Oh, she would love to talk to you. You
Yeah.
want to know about all the juicy details. Yeah. I mean,
wow.
Pam will tell you the history
Okay.
of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Like, I mean, it's crazy. So that was my life, like growing up and being around it.
But how does that mix with music? Like, was your dad doing music? Or?
My dad is a musician. My mom was also, not only was she a dancer, but she was an entertainer too.
Okay.
And so she would go to all of these music gigs, and there would be drums there. And little redheaded Chelsey would be like, "Oh, look at the drums." And, I'd play it. And, my mom was like, "Oh, that's so funny that you're, into drums," because her mother, my grandmother, was a percussionist.
Oh.
And whenever I was starting to take like an interest in drums, my mom was like, "Okay, like I could see this." And then when we had to choose an elective in middle school, I remember seeing the percussion section play, and I was like, "That is so cool. I want to do that." And I told my grandmother that. And that was whenever I found out. She was like, "Oh, that's so funny that you want to be a percussionist," because I was a percussionist.
Wow.
She was in the Oak Cliff Orchestra. There was an Oak Cliff big band orchestra here, and she was a drummer in that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so when and I had no idea, and like books that my grandmother had, we even like study till this day at UNT and TCU. So I had like my grandmother's snare drumming books.
Oh.
And it was so cool. And so when my grandmother told me that, I was like, "Oh, I'm sold. I want to do percussion for the rest of my life because I want to like, honor her legacy." Because, she was really into music. And then, she had some kids and like settled down and stuff. And so she was just kind of like, "Oh, whatever." But there are pictures that my aunt found when she was a drum major, which was so, I mean, like the old black and white photos, and like she's got like the baton and everything.
That's
and
so cool.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, my mom really wanted me to be a cheerleader.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like that might have been a more natural path.
She really wanted me to be a cheerleader. But whenever I, told my mom, I said, "Hey, this is really what I want to do. I want to, I really want to play drums. I really want to be in percussion and explore that." My mom was like, "Well, instead of, being like me, you're going to be like my mother, and I'm okay with that." And I'm like, "Thank you, Mom. I appreciate it."
That's funny.
Yeah.
So like so you're influenced like immediately by drums being around, but what kind of music? Was there music that you were connecting to drums at that age, or did that come later?
The funny thing about it is that like, even whenever I was younger, the style that I loved the most was R&B. Loved it. And so when I sing, I think like I feel like my vocals are more like R&B influenced. The first CD I ever had was Baduism. I was 6 and I was obsessed with that song Next Lifetime that would come on the radio. And I really loved Erykah Badu. And then I was young. I didn't know that she was like a Dallas musician. So here I was like already being like, "Dallas music, baby." That kind of thing.
Not to skip ahead, but didn't you end up like playing with her on something or collaborating with her? Is that right?
Most of her musicians. I have met her. I've met her once, and then just even a couple months ago, I played drums for her backup singer, Lala Johnson. She's in a Tina Turner tribute band.
Oh, okay.
And Lala called me up and was like, "Hey, will you play drums at this like sold out casino show I'm doing in Mississippi?" And I was like, "Yes, ma'am." And showed up. And Nigel Rivers, I've played a lot with him. Like she's played bass for Erykah Badu. So a lot of her musicians, like, we've done a lot of stuff together.
Gotcha.
So, I'm like 1 degree away.
Yeah. She's like always like in the ether, it seems.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's just like, she might walk in at any moment. Just be like, "There you go."
That'd be great. We'd love to have her on. We'll see how that ever happens. So R&B, but like, I don't know, because I was in bands too. So I feel like there's a lot of school music that kind of becomes your life for a while when you're learning it.
Learned a lot of classical.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about it, like learning classical, is the technical side of things. I was in a lot of orchestras growing up, and then I did marching band. I think marching band was probably my favorite. Loved being on the drum line. Yeah. Loved it a lot. I played snare mainly until I did drum corps, and then I was like, I'm going to try the front ensemble. And I was like, oh man, this is great. Like, you just like push your instrument out in front of the field and just like you hit your spot every time, you know, like
nice.
it was fun, you know, just going to park this vibraphone right here and play, you know, and it's like, wow, I was really like getting my butt kicked, but I'm glad I did, because it really put a lot of, it gave me a lot of discipline, to be on the drum line and to do all of that. And so I just really loved like playing the beats, so being in, and then I loved percussion ensembles, classical percussion ensembles, and seeing what all these instruments could do, and noticing, and like being in that classical world and even marching band world, and like, you know, playing all of this really experimental, fabulous music, and then like hearing pop music, and then just hearing how the drum parts are there, and or just like mainstream music. It was one of those things that was like, man, you know, this is kind of, it would just be so cool to like have more percussion, you know, in these songs. And so, you know, so I really ended up like, if I wanted more percussion, I would listen to like Gloria Estefan or something like that, you know, like where it was like, oh, okay, cool. So, you know, so it was like, you hear like the Latin percussion there. But it was like a goal of mine to be like, I really want to put more percussion in either like hip hop music, R&B music, or rock music. And so then when I ended up like years later being in a psychedelic rock band, I was like, all right, everybody, this is a vibraphone. What's that? It's vibraphone. Okay, we're gonna play vibraphone on this one track. Like, okay, put it. And they're like, ooh, that's trippy. I like it. You know, and it was like, yeah. I know. So, you know, so it was just so growing up, like playing all of these instruments and, you know, feeling like they were putting these really unique instruments kind of in a box. I wanted to break out of that box,
right?
You know, and make marimba maybe not as big of a household name as like the guitar, but at least people could see, you know, marimba and be like, wow, I know that percussion instrument. That's a marimba. And so that's been kind of my personal mission, even as a young kid, like, you know, getting in the car and like listening to pop music and just being like, okay, the drums are just like boot, cut, boot, cut, boot, cut.
Boring.
Yeah. And it's like, man, you could really be like boot, cut, you know, like doing different stuff there. And it was like, and some artists, you know, I have to say, like, do experiment with it.
Sure.
And it's really cool to hear that. Even like, you know, listening to the percussion loops that like Madonna had in the 80s, you know, you could hear that, you know, they were trying to do that like Holiday, you know,
They're
you know,
more with the,
like even just like they had go-go bells, all this other stuff. So it's like, you know, it's always like in the background.
Every now and again, like I remember clearly I was in LA at the Alligator Lounge and there was some band opening for my friend's band, and the lead singer was the drummer, and it was like he was playing lead drums, and it was astounding. And I don't know whatever happened to them. Never heard of them again. But it was so cool. And another band I loved in college was Chip Shakespeare, which like basically Elaine's bass drum was on its side, and she didn't use any foot pedals. She had the cymbal set, so she did everything, and it gave this extra kind of like hop to it. Yeah.
Did she have like a cocktail kit?
It was. You know, it was kind of like a regular kit except for the bass drum. It was a full-size bass drum too on its side. Yeah, and actually Matt was the singer. He taught her that method, and I had friends in Chicago back in the day that learned from Matt, and it's a whole thing. But
cool.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm into it. I mean, then I got into the Grateful Dead, which is 2 drummers.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and actually, I remember thinking at times it's like you should do more. Mm-hmm. You should be like you should be going counter, like there should be lead counter, you know, and then but then it's like, well, they got 5 other instruments, so you have to fit it together somehow, I guess.
Yeah. There was this one band that I saw that I thought did 2 drummers really well. Now, you know, I've like Pearl Earl, like we've opened for the OCs and stuff like that. OCs has 2 drummers, and you know, and so the way that I see, like, you know, 2 drummers like that is like they're playing the same exact thing, so it kind of reminds me of drumline, right?
Yeah.
Where you have to play the same exact thing and be very precise. You're just amplifying that sound. But there was one band that we played with, I believe it was called like Disbrew, and they were from Mexico, and they had 2 drummers, but the drummers were splitting their parts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is what I think, two drummers should do.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
mean, just having like a conversation, it was so cool. So like, they would play a groove, but the way they would split up their parts, it would create this whole in my mind, I played in a gamelan ensemble. That is, gamelan is the music of Bali. It's a mallet percussion ensemble.
Okay.
So like they have brass bars, and you use a little hammer, and you hit the hammer, and the bar will ring out, and you have to dampen it. And so they have like this little ensemble of all these different brass bars. And the way that it works is that one side plays a certain rhythm, the other side plays another rhythm, and when they play together, it creates this whole just universe of sound. And so what they call that is an interlocking part. Interlocking.
Yeah.
And so the best way that I can describe like those drummers is like it was like watching a gamelan ensemble, like how they were playing, it was like that interlocking part.
Wow.
Where they just like locked in, and even though they're playing two completely different rhythms, it just locked in so well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I dig that.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I like where your head is at with like bringing this into conventional music where it's not happening. I mean, well, let's skip over. I've got a list of bands that you've played in. Vegas Star, Velvet Army, Bounce House Cathedral.
Oh God, that was so long ago.
Yeah.
And Sonny was in Velvet Army. Didn't you?
Sonny Marcel?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Oh, she mentioned that. I remember.
Yeah.
Let's see. Center Dallas Youth Orchestra. Wait a minute. This is not in chronological order. There's no way.
So I was in the Greater Dallas Youth Orchestra whenever I was in high school, which was the Dallas Symphony Orchestra's youth program.
Got it.
And so like the principal percussionist at the time, Doug Howard, he was our teacher. And we would always perform at the Meyerson. And so it was really cool because the acoustics there were fabulous.
Yeah. I've only seen one show, and I feel gypped because they didn't use the pipe organ.
Oh, I know the organ in there.
The
It's
coolest thing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
Historic.
Let's see. And then we were talking before, the Boston Crusaders Drum and Bugle Corps. That's something you did during high school too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a little bit of college.
Okay.
Yeah, first years of college. So that's like more like your professional marching band.
Okay.
Drum Corps International is a really amazing group where you have competitive drum corps that is focused with color guard, brass, and drumline. They don't have any woodwinds, so sorry. I know you played saxophone.
I played it briefly, yeah.
Yeah, but we could have put you on, xylophone or something.
I would have played some kind of percussion.
Yeah.
I would have been happy with it.
And it's very intense. You tour all over the U.S. and you compete with other drum corps. People from all over the world audition for this.
Wow.
Like when I did Boston Crusaders, one of our snare guys, his name was Patrick Dom, and he was from Amsterdam. We had people from Japan try out. We had this one guy that made the bass line, didn't speak any English, Japanese, but killed it. And and so you're traveling with all of these people. You're competing with different divisions, and so Boston Crusaders was a Division I, which is like the world class level. And so when you tour, it's not glamorous. It has actually set me up for the touring that I've done all around. They stay at high schools and you sleep on the gym floor.
Oh.
And it's not glamorous.
Oh, I guess there's a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people because it's usually about 130 to 150 people,
How do
I
you
believe.
even sleep? I guess when you're younger, you can do.
Yeah, that's what you age out at 21.
Yeah.
So they're like, when you're 22, your back might go out, that kind of thing.
I'm just thinking now about how people.
Yeah, and so it is. So it's a lot of older It's usually older high school students, but mainly college.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a interesting environment, walking in junior, senior year. And it's mostly college kids. And so I was like, okay, I got to step up my game a little bit. And even though it's Boston Crusaders, there were just people from all over the world. Not a lot of Boston people, but it was fun, and their accents and stuff too. Right. I didn't realize how Texan I was until they started pointing that out, and I was like, oh, I guess you're right. But yeah, so we would go all over, and rehearsals were 8 to 12 hours a day.
Oh my
and then you would
gosh.
have your show. It was very intense. You get really good really fast.
How long would your like show be?
The show is about 12 minutes long.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is stuff, I mean, I guess you'd film it, but you wouldn't, like, there's no audio of this. That's like the point, is to see the whole thing together.
Yeah, because you would go to I mean, there's albums out there that like people have recorded, but the main thing is that, you know, you go to these football stadiums and you see the show and you see what people do, and the reason why you practice so much is because the moment that our instructors like would get the judge sheet, and these judges are like, you know, they've been doing this, like drum corps has been around since like the 60s and like I want to say late 60s, early 70s. It really started taking off in like the early 90s for us. And now it's like, I mean, it's still a really big thing. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger every year. And I've had like drum students have done it, and it's just really cool. But once you get the sheet, they go, oh, they didn't like that one part in the show. We got to change it tomorrow. And so that's why we would rehearse all the time, because they'd be like, no, they didn't like this brass line here. They didn't like our drill here. They didn't like our position on the field or whatever. They had something to say. So they were changing your show.
Wow.
Like on a daily basis.
Yeah. Not the music, just the choreography.
Oh, and the music too.
So this is original stuff, or they just had the...
Yeah, it's original.
Okay.
Yeah, so like the writers would be there, and the writers
this is crazy
and
to
the
me.
writers would be like touring with you, and they would come out and they would just be like, no, we don't, they didn't like that one part. We're going to change this one part. We're going to change the percussion run here or something like that. So you had to like pick up on everything like really, really quick. So then by the time you have like the finals, you essentially try to have like the perfect show.
Right.
And it's really hard because like all of the other drum corps, they're also doing the same thing. So everyone's like aiming for this like next level of perfection.
Sure. How long is the season of that?
It is usually from May and it ends August. So it's your summer.
Okay. And like, what was the highest you got to on like one of your teams?
6th.
6. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty, like how many, like hundreds of teams?
So when I did it, I believe there were like 29 groups in the first class division. There's first, second, third.
Okay.
And and I don't know how many's in the second and third division. And also the thing too is that like, some of these drum corps, they get phased out because of a low like enrollment.
Sure.
Or they didn't get enough money, because it's a lot of money to fund this, because like, you got to feed these people too. But like, some of the times it was just like, all right, here's lunch, here's a peanut butter sandwich. Enjoy, like, oh, we made, some pasta. Enjoy, so it was just kind of like, it was like one of those where it kind of felt like, you were in the Marines or something, but it is, I mean, it's core style. So it is taken from that kind of militant mentality.
Sure.
And it's really hard. I mean, you really have to challenge yourself.
How long did you do that?
I was only in it for a season.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say.
I was only in it for a season. But there are some people that do, I mean, they love it. And if I had, and you have to pay for it. And if I had more funding, I would have kept going.
Oh, okay, so it was a funding thing.
Yeah. For me, yes, it was a funding thing. Also, one of the years that I tried to do it, I was in a car accident and I really hurt myself and I couldn't march and I couldn't like do it. So that was another reason why I couldn't do like a season for that. But just the experience of what I had there was like, I learned so much. And then after you have this experience and you go to like back to your like high school marching band, you're just kind of like, yeah, this is different. This is different.
Oh God, I mean, how do you even go back?
This is different. You just have to be like, at least can eat something that's not a peanut butter sandwich.
Well, sure, but I mean, like artistically and mentally, like, I mean, not to be cocky, but aren't you like among the best performers in your high school? So like when you come back, are you like, guys, get it together? Or
I would say taking more of a leadership position, yes.
Yeah.
And just being like, these are some of the things that I learned, and I feel like if we applied it here, then it would help.
Okay.
And so it did help me become like a better leader. It helped me become a better teacher, like time management, everything like that. And then by the time like I went to college and when I was at TCU, I was actually the first female snare drummer.
Wow.
The freshman snare drummer there.
Huh.
In like, at least in Brian West's history. There was another girl that made it, but like, unfortunately they had to like cut her, and they were like, Chelsey, you know, like, because of your experience and everything, like, you know, you've got a kind of a tough spot, and we know that you've been in tough situations, so we just need you to step it up. And I was like, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, I just, you know, I had to step it up and really like, you know, claim that spot, really.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those things too, like, kind of realizing, because I was at that point when it came to like the drum positions, not necessarily the mallet positions that we would call front ensemble or pit, the actual wearing the drums, I was the only girl on that drum line.
Wow.
And it was very much having to be like, you know, I've done some tough stuff, I deserve to be here.
Sure.
And I work really hard. And so it was like a butt-kicking experience even after having that drum corps experience. You know?
Were you feeling, is there sexism involved in that?
I felt like I was the only girl in the frat for sure.
But you were accepted.
I feel like the guys pushed me harder than like their other peers, because they wanted to prove if I could get the spot. And so I held my own, and I think they really appreciated that.
I can see an 80s movie coming out of this story right here.
Yeah.
You know, you win them over because you just start drumming like a badass.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I did learn from, we call them caption heads, our directors in drum corps. So when I was there, our caption head, Rich Viano, he told me one thing, because he was like, man, I'll be honest with you, kid. You know, you're young, you're a female, you're trying out for something really hard. Like, this is not marching band. Like, this is drum corps. We're tough. He was like, you know, but I can tell you work hard and you want this. He was like, and you know, and people are going to probably look at you and think some things because, I don't know, you're a woman or whatever. He was like, you just remember this. He was like, you just let your sticks do the talking, and that's it. And I've always lived by that when he told me that. I was like, you know what? Any gig that I play, anything that I do where, like, you know, I know, like, yeah, I have a big red curly hair. What, you know, I don't look like, you know, you could, I suck at hide and seek. I'll tell you that right now. You know, like, you know, I kind of stand out.
Yeah.
Right. And
personality
so,
too.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. And so, you know, so it was one of those things that was like, you know, when you go to a gig, people are going to think things, but don't say anything. Just go and let your sticks do the talking. And I've always lived by that. And so, you know, so after having that experience, you know, my senior year of high school, basically, and then going to TCU, which at the time was the #1 college drumline in the world. And that's why they also were very like, like, you know, hey, we just won the best drum line and you're like on the best snare line in the world at a college standard. Like they had surpassed UNT at that time. So they were like, you know, if you're going to be on this, you got to be serious. And I was like, done. And so I would just go and I would learn and I would just, you know, keep up with them. And they were like, and then at the end of it, they were like, okay, that was good. And I was like, and that's all I needed. But it was never like, you know, no one's babying you. Yeah. And it was very like hardcore, like, you know, we should have been chewing tobacco while drumming kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like very much like, And so that was a lot of my experience. And then whenever I went to UNT and did marching band there, I was done with the whole snare drumming and marching. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be on vibraphone. What's that like? What a bunch of happy little hippies. I was so happy in the front ensemble. Like we were wearing flip-flops to practice and stuff. And we were just like, yeah, all right, now let's try, you know, this exercise in this key. And we're just, you know, okay. I mean, I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I was like, man, after all of that, here we are. I mean, you know, we would get serious, of course, but
it's percussion. I guess, like, where did the melody come in? Like, I mean, are you getting that in like orchestra and band class? Like, how did it's like his drum is not melody, but marimba is for sure.
Right, and even then, like, I remember my professor saying that even though that like a marimba is, you know, you would think it's a melodic instrument. It's still a rhythmic instrument.
I mean, I get that, yeah.
And if you can make a rhythmic instrument sound melodic, you have mastered percussion. Like even the drum kit.
Yeah, I can see that, yeah.
I remember when I first played in front of Ed Soph, who's a legendary jazz player and jazz drum set player. And he was giving a clinic, and this was right before I went to UNT, about jazz drums. And he was like, you know, anyone want to come up and try to play a little drum, you know? And at that point, like, I wasn't drumming with a lot of people yet, but I was really studying jazz drums and like making my way like out of, I guess, my little percussion bubble, because I never thought that I would be a drummer. I just always thought I'd be straight percussion. And so when he was like, hey, come on up and play, I was like, I'll try it. And I remember when I played something, he said, oh, wow, that's really good drumline technique. If you were on the drum line, you would win. He was like, but we're playing drums, and we're playing jazz drums. And he was like, go back and listen to the track. What is the singer doing? The singer's changing her voice. She's adding all these accents, these like little inflections, these different little tones and whatnot. He was like, can you match what her voice is doing on the drums? And I was like, whoa, okay, good to know. And so then we listened to the track again, and I was like, oh, you know, instead of being like, ba da 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 da, you know, like, which is that very drumline style, you know, then I was like, oh, she's going like, da 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 da, you know, and I was like, okay, so, ba da 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 ba, ba da, you know, like try to like have to like get those like little hits and stuff and be like, okay, a little louder, a little less. And then after I did that, I was like, oh, I get it now. He was like, huh, not bad for a drumline girl. Okay. He was like, yeah, he was like, you're getting it now. I'm like, okay. And that was another like moment for me that I had to be like, wow, you know, like I've been thinking so for years of that like drum corps mentality, just like beat it into you. You must be precise. You must be perfect. You know, and then the classical world, that's like, you know, also very precise and very perfect. Now we go into a completely other world, jazz, and playing with people and musicianship, and then thinking about, oh, now that I'm playing with a singer, what can I do to enhance the singer's voice? What can I do to enhance the sound of these drums, or any percussion instrument for that matter, to turn it more into not only just like a rhythmic machine, but also a melodic machine too. And so that's been a huge philosophy of mine when I approach any instrument. It's just like, you know, it's not just, can I play this rhythm here? You know, it's like, okay, how can I play this and be loose and just be like, you know, like just try to get into it.
Yeah.
And so that has helped me a lot. And it's really cool because whenever I've played gigs in the past, like drum set gigs specifically, I've had other drummers be like, you're a musical drummer. Have you ever been told that before? And I'm like, yes. Yeah. And thank you for noticing, because that's exactly what I want to be called.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that. That's cool. Well, then, I mean, I'm sure we're skipping stuff, but I'm going to head to Earl.
What a band. That was
but you're
crazy.
Keyboard in that band.
Yeah, and percussion.
Okay.
But yeah, that was my first, that was my really, the whole reason why I joined Earl. Well, there was a few reasons, but the main reason I joined Earl is because other than my own like solo stuff that I had done in the past, I never played synthesizer in a band. And, you know, I know how to play piano. I teach piano. I'm not like the best pianist or anything, but, you know, I know how to do it. And when Ariel asked me, hey, do you want to like, you know, play synth in my band? I was like, you know what? This would be a really great learning experience. I'm in.
Why did she think to ask you when you're not a synth player?
We had jammed one night and there was a little microkorg and I was just playing around on the microkorg and she was like, yeah. And it's just like, hey, you're fun. Do you want to be in my band?
Nice.
And I was like, yeah. She was like, yeah. And then she was like, you know, you can just play keys. It's gonna be good. I was like, I'll be honest with you. I've never played keys in a band before, but I want to try. I want this to be a challenge and see what I can learn. And because of that, I've learned so much about the synth. Our last album that we did, It's Dread. When we recorded out in LA, we recorded with Thomas from, he does Studio 22, but he's the keyboard player, or really synth player, in the OCs. And recording on that album with all of his synths that he has like 30 synths or something, and he knows how to play all of them. And so like he would listen to something and he'd listen to my keyboard lines. He would be like, oh man, that's really cool. He was like, here, let me pull out this one synth. And he would have like a drawer of like all these little synths. And he would be like, here, this one sound is good. He was like, yeah, this is a Moog, like just like going through it and just being like, yeah, if we like turn it this way and we get the square wave and then we,
synthesizers.
Oh my God. It was, and so it was like taking a master class in synth. And what I love about that album when I listen to those synth parts back is that, I'll hear those synthesizers and be like, oh, that's whenever I learned about, I think it's called the Matriarch. When the Matriarch was one of the synthesizers that we used that I'd never heard of before that I loved the sound. Like we did Fender Rhodes. We did the Prophet that I brought. His Prophet, he did Prophet 06. I was using Ariel's Prophet 08. That was the one that I used for a very long time. I think there was even like the Rev 2. I mean, he had like Nords, he had everything. And I just remember just like being like, you just tell me what you want. And it just felt again like a masterclass, just like standing beside him and being like, okay, so when you turn this knob and you do this thing for this synth, it's going to make this sound. And then he'd be like, okay, yeah, I think we got the sound. Let's record it. I'm like, yes, sir. It was just like, so I love going back and, listening to that album because I was like, oh yeah, like there's even sounds in there that I just would like, it would pop out and I'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot we did that one.
Right. Like that's fun stuff.
Yeah.
Coming up with those little different sounds.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, this is a first for my podcast. I've had every member now of the Helium Queens on the show. You're the final member. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, you saved the best for last. No, I'm just kidding. Everyone knows it's Charla. So
yeah, you all have your own thing going.
I'm just kidding.
It's almost like,
I'm just kidding.
Like a super group in a way.
It is. I mean, my God, I love Poppy Zander. I always say she's like the longest relationship I've like ever had. Like a music relationship for sure. And Poppy, Charla, and I, like, we first started playing like Poppy's music, which is I guess like the first thing that comes to mind was like very cabaret or what have you. We used to play like a lot of like steampunk festivals and stuff, which was like really fun. It was just a really good time. And I remember when we were driving up to Kansas to play this one festival, we were playing this women's festival in Kansas, and it was just like me, Charlotte, Poppy, and we're just like driving along, and Poppy goes, hey, I have this idea. I might sound crazy, but I just feel like you two would really get it and be a part of this. I want to do kind of like this futuristic space band. And I don't know what it's going to sound like yet, but I have all these ideas. I want it to have a storyline. I want us to have outfits, crazy outfits. And I just want it to be, I just want it to be something that's different. And that, I guess basically that we need in culture. Very artsy, very just unique. And I was like, yeah, okay. And then I was like, well, what do you want the band to be called? And she was like, Helium Queens. I was like, that's a really cool name. And she was like, yeah, because I think we could be something like, these queens from the moon, and helium is, I guess, the primary gas on the moon. And she was like, yeah, so she was like, so Helium Queens, it makes sense, And so I was like, and so she had like, she started talking about like this whole storyline that she'd been like brewing up for the last like year. And I was like, dang, dude, this sounds awesome. She was like, cool. So are y'all in? And, like, we were like, of course, like that would be great. And so, we played the gig, we come back, we kind of like start talking about it. And sure enough, later that year, like Poppy was like, I booked us a gig as Helium Queens. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. She was like, yeah, so now we got to make up some songs. And I was like, okay.
That's funny.
Well, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You know, that's how you do it. It's kind of funny because it's kind of how the opera came about too. You know, she had the storyline. She had like the idea. There were like some songs kind of in the works. But when she had booked the opera, she was like, okay, yeah, the opera is like happening back in 2021. And she was like, so we got to sit down and start really writing this opera. And I was like, okay. So that was like a spring break for me where Poppy like camped out at my house and we were just like in the backyard. Like we would have coffee and talk about our ideas and write things down. And then Charlotte would come over and be like, okay, this is what we have. This is kind of the script. Here's an idea of a song. Let's just jam it out, see what happens. And it would just like, the thing about us that I love is it's so natural and it just worked. And we were just like, okay, and that's the Queen's entrance. Got it. Okay, now we need to, we need to go with this one.
What's
and it was
the instrumentation in the band?
Let's see. So Poppy is synthesizer vocals. Charlotte is electric violin vocals, and then I'm drums and vocals.
Okay, so it's you guys like play your main instruments and sing.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, we write. You know, we're collaborative writers.
Do you have recordings out?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you can find us on Spotify. We are going to be releasing a single here pretty soon. I would say like mid to end February. So keep a lookout for that. So we have a single coming out, What Is Love. That song has gone through so many transformations because when I had the idea for the lyrics and like kind of the thought for the song, I wanted it to be like kind of a dancey song, but I wasn't sure like if I was going to do like a solo track with it or whatnot. But then I was like, no, this feels very like this should be a Helium Queen song. And so I remember when, I was like, okay, like here's the idea for the song. And then it just felt good, and I wasn't sure what the verses were going to be yet. So Poppy had just kind of put some verses on it. We were performing it and we were like, okay, yeah, like this is the idea. But when the opera came, it was like, that was going to be like my solo. And so then I was like, okay, now I need to really rework the verses to where it makes sense with the opera. So then we had an opera version of it. And it went over like really well. And then now that we went to like, we have a studio version of it, which has completely transformed. So that song has gone through so many different like transformations, and I hope it keeps going. If anyone hears this and you want to remix it, let's bring on phase 4.
Strong.
I'm really happy with how it's turned out in the studio. We recorded with Michael Briggs, which I think you've had on the show in the past. And then Dean Adams, I don't know if you know him. He drums for Rose Garden Funeral Party.
Oh, okay. I've seen him around.
He's awesome. He also like drums for Lorelei K, but he's a fabulous percussionist drummer too.
I've shot him with Lorelei, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, he's fabulous. So he helped like produce it and really like, he had a really great insight on like, adding more percussion to the tracks. And it was like, cool. I didn't even think about like, putting it here and doing it there. So it's really cool to like hear this track in particular, because I feel like it's our most produced track that we've released or will release. And it's also, a very like percussion heavy track too, which is like taking back to where it's like, me being in the 8th grade and, learning all these percussion instruments and being like, I want it to be in a pop song one day. That would be great. And now here I am 36 and like,
made it happen.
Yeah, I know, dreams really do come true. You just gotta wait a little
work
bit.
at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're getting toward the end, but we haven't really talked about like your solo stuff. What does that sound like?
So my solo stuff, I took a really interesting, and then again with like What Is Love kind of opened up this new path for me. I recently released a song called In Tonight, and my first music video, which has been like, it's been really awesome. And I would say like mainly synth, percussion, disco. And so one of my like pastimes with my mom is that we would listen to Donna Summer, we would listen to Diana Ross, and so I loved it. So like I have that kind of in me, and so when I did In Tonight, it was like a dancey kind of disco song, and I wanted it again to be like very percussion heavy. So everything on that track is drums, percussion, synth, my vocals. And when I've performed live in the past is I have an electric xylophone called a mallet cat, and you can get any sounds on it. It's a synthesizer, but set up as a xylophone.
Oh, that is cool.
I love it.
I have not seen that.
It's really neat. And so I perform with that, other little percussion instruments too, and I loop it. And so I've done that for a while, and it's also really fun because, since it's just me and I'm a little one-woman band, I also, in the moment, as I always say, if the spirit moves me, I just start making up songs. And that's what I love about, the live solo shows is that, if there's someone that I don't know, just says something or does something, I'm like, you know what, we're gonna make this a thing really quick. Let's just be in the moment and go with it. And so so I'll just loop a little something and play a little something and then just start making up lyrics and stuff. The last solo show that I did like that was at Red Zeppelin Records in McKinney.
Oh, okay.
That place is great, and I was really impressed with the McKinney music scene.
Yeah,
you didn't think, you're just oh, y'all are cool.
Yeah, they're building that new theater too, that big stadium, 6,000 seats or something.
Yeah, and so it was just so funny because it was getting there was just oh my god, I can't believe there's just all this traffic and people almost hit me and just so much was going on, and so I made up this song on stage. It's just one of those days, and then and then everyone in the crowd, I was like, all right, it's just one of those days. They'd be like, one of those days. I'm like, yeah, we had the show together. And then just start rapping and stuff on top of it, because I'll freestyle every once in a while too. Again, being back in that kind of R&B hip hop kind of realm, I enjoy doing that from time to time, and so it was fun just having the crowd sing and be really into it and freestyle on top. So it's a fun little show. It's a fun show. It's kind of I guess you could say it's kind of like Paul Slavin's in a way, but more poppy, and percussive. I've been really fortunate to have the fun little music career that I have. When I'm not performing, I'm a music teacher. As I mentioned before, I was a band director, and now I teach privately, so I can focus more on gigging.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really happy with like all the people that I've played with, and even like the the one-off shows that I've done.
Look, I didn't bring up that you've played with some really cool people. You've played with Desi 5,
Mm-hmm.
Mark Altieri, Charlie Crockett.
I did. Yeah, that was the gig the one that got away.
Oh, really?
I'm serious. So it was one of the best gigs I ever played. We played at, and it was my first big radio show that I was ever on.
Okay.
I was drumming for him. And if you look at the Trinity River music video, they had cameras there, and I got in the video. And it's actual footage of us at that radio station playing. And then the Sons of Herman Hall, he was there to promote that show, because this was like his first big like breakout show, as him being like Charlie Crockett, and so he was also filming his music video that was also going to be part of it. None of that footage got used, which is sad, because that was a great show, and it was like sold out. And I just remember being in the back of the drums, and I had this feeling. I was like, oh my God, man, I feel like legit right now. Like it was just such a good show. I was like, man, I just feel super legit. This is like, I'm playing with like good musicians. Poppy was actually playing piano for that gig too.
Oh, really?
She played one of the best. So like, it was like one of the best players ever.
Yeah.
But like that, I like that solo that she played was just like unforgettable.
Yeah.
I was like, dang, and we were like, the only chicks on stage.
Yeah,
and
Emsy
like,
was playing too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy. And so we were just like, man. And so after the gig, it was funny because Poppy and I had another gig to get to. So I was like, man, I did a radio show. I'm playing 2 gigs. Like, I think I'm, I think I'm starting to work,
Yeah.
He comes up to me and, he like pays me out, and he was like, well, Ma, it seems like everybody wants you to be my drummer. So what do you say? I got 3 gigs tomorrow in Deep Ellum. You in this or not? And this was before he really like blew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to think about it for a second, because, it's one of those, you gonna do it or not? And then I'm like, I had just started my private lesson studio. It was a really awesome gig. I had to weigh in like, your whole life is about to change if you go with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And, one thing about me, I'm very Capricorn, job security is a thing for me.
Okay. Yeah.
So I was like, you could say yes, or you could be like, maybe I'll be your sub and then do your other things. And so I looked at him and I was like, well, I just got, I'm a band director still. I'm also starting my music studio as a private lesson teacher, like I am gigging, and this gig was one of the best gigs I've ever played. I was like, if you need a sub, I'll be a sub, but I don't think I can be your full-time drummer. And he was like, well, all right, thought I would ask, but, if I see you, I see you. It was a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And he handed me the money, and he walked off, and I was like, I think I made a really big mistake.
Oh, man. I mean, but how would you know, really?
Yeah, now, like, you look at him, and I'm just like, dang.
Yeah.
And it was so funny, because when I did play with Desi 5 for the Dallas Observer Music Awards, I think it was back in, like, 2018, Desi wanted to have an all-female backing band for him when he performed, and he called me to play drums, and I was like, yeah, no problem, man. Well, Charlie Crockett was playing that show, and this is when, again, he was like, he was leaving Dallas, like one of the last shows, and I remember like we had just finished our sound check at the Bomb Factory, and I'm walking down the stairs, and as I'm walking down the stairs, like Desi sees Charlie, and Charlie looks up, and I'm like, what's up, Charlie Crockett? Good to see you. And he was like, well, hey, Ma, it's that drummer that put the jazz on it. Look who it is. I was like, good to see you. He was like, how you doing? I said, I'm good, playing with Desi. He said, oh, well, that's great. And then he was like, well, gotta go to sound check. He was like, always good to see you. I was like, good to see you too. And then he walked up the stairs, and Desi looked at me, and he was like, that was dope. I was like, it kind of was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I was like, I've done some cool things, I think. So that's it. That's all I have to say.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you didn't let your sticks do the talking today.
Yeah, I know.
Much less interesting. Anyway, Chelsey, thank you so much. We're looking forward to the Helium Queen releases and stuff from you and all the stuff we're talking about. We'll have links on the page, and we will be, looking forward to stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank Chelsey Danielle for being a great guest. The song What Is Love by Helium is out now. Thank you to the Deep Ellum Community Center for letting us record there. Theme song, The Place to Be by Electric Ants. You can catch the Dallas Famous podcast every Sunday at 1 o'clock on Deep Ellum Radio, and then Wednesday on all the podcast platforms. Please like, subscribe, enjoy, share, all the good things. We'll see you next time.